All right, welcome to another episode of Revenue Blueprint. We are very excited to have Rory Sadler with us today. Rory is a co-founder and CEO of Trumpet. It is a sales tool used by companies like Deal and Chili Piper. I will not try to pitch Trumpet or explain. I will let Rory do that himself. And before that, he was a sales leader at Hotjar and worked at other startups. So very excited to have you on the show today, Rory.
Great to be here. Thanks very much for having me.
All right, so real quick, just give us the high level of what Trumpet is, and then we'll get into the meat of the question.
Quick elevator pitch, as they call it. So I guess we start with the problem. So sales cycles are getting longer, lots of stakeholders, like very complex journeys taking place. And we alleviate that with the power of microsites. So in seconds, revenue teams can spin up automatically personalized buyer journeys from outreach right through to onboarding to close more deals quicker.
Very needed today, right? Everyone's seeing these deals slow down. So what I think is interesting about you particular is that you're a non-technical founder, right? You come from sales, so you resonate with your problem very deeply, which is something you and I had talked about before. So one topic that Seth and I talk about a lot is how product market fit changes, right? Whatever you start a company with is rarely what you have 6 or 12 months later, and it continues to change. So can you tell us a story about how your product market fit has changed over the last year or two?
Yeah, I think when we first approached Trumpet, we went in and interviewed 200 salespeople, 100 empires, like collectively the founders had sold software for over 20 years combined. We had a very good idea of what we wanted Trumpet to do and to look like and to achieve, but that doesn't mean that we speak for every sales company and team out there. So when we launched our beta, it was very intentional that it was like 6 months unlimited free usage to get as much feedback as possible for us to understand where we could deliver the most value, where we could drive adoption, and where we could increase time to value and start to understand if there was like repeatable sales motion to be achieved. So what kind of logos were engaging with us? Where were we solving like deep enough problems? And that was like 6 months of non-stop speaking to customers. We have core values, not for the sake of them, because we actually believe in them. And one of them is about being completely obsessed with our customers. So to this day, I still speak to, like, there is an automated trigger. If you haven't used Trumpet in a while, you get an email with my calendar. Let's book a call and find out why. So from day one, unlimited usage, free beta, even to today, like we speak to customers nonstop because they know what they want to use Trumpet for, and we can't get into their heads without speaking to them. So yeah, we're building it together with them rather than for them.
So many people say they're customer focused and that they talk to customers. It sounds like you actually do it.
100%. I'm on Intercom more than the rest of the team. I love getting like solving their problems ASAP. There's nothing worse than seeing someone unhappy or having a bug or anything like that. So yeah, I know it's not scalable, but you got to do the things that don't scale.
Maybe going back all the way to the origin, and because we like Jason said, we kind of nerd out over this stuff. What was your original thesis of what was the idea that you were going into and kind of testing against the market? And do you remember what that was? I'm sure it changed a lot. What was it, and how close to that did the kind of where you are now end up?
Yeah, I mean, it was born out of a personal pain point. I cannot tell you how awesome it is to be able to use Trumpet daily for our sales process. About 6 years in B2B SaaS sales, like working on SMB, enterprise, leading teams and things like that. What I noticed more and more was being a buyer actually sucks. Like it really does. There's just so much back and forth. You have to like evaluate competitors, look at content, evaluate risk and calculate ROI and all this stuff. And I was creating Google Drives for larger opportunities, putting material in there for them so they can easily share it, even looking at Notion pages. I've looked at microsite tools from back in the day, super expensive, very clunky. And what I was doing for my larger clients, I was like, why can't I do this for the smaller guys? Because actually sometimes they're your biggest champions. They haven't got the logo of large enterprise, but they will go and champion your product to people that you would never imagine. And we still have that. We have experienced that today at Trumpet. We don't treat anyone differently. But I wanted to give everyone that equal experience. So I thought if I could create a microsite in seconds that is auto-branded, is auto-personalized, and alleviates the pressure on my champion, it's a no-brainer. And when we spoke to salespeople doing our research, they all agreed and resonated. And when we spoke to end buyers as well. So we had that concept and we're very kind of set on that. And today it's definitely that, plus a whole bunch of other things that we would never imagine that are awesome that our customers have helped shape. But yeah, I think the initial idea for Trumpet is very true to what we've achieved today.
What were some of those kind of light bulb moments when you were talking to your customers that maybe have added on to that? Or, oh, wow, we would have never known that from these kind of re-emphasizing how important it is to talk to customers.
Yeah. One thing that we weren't going to prioritize in the early days was and this sounds like a no-brainer, was the option to give buyers.
Doesn't it always do? In hindsight, it always does, yeah.
We felt like incorrectly to almost one direction, like create the space for the buyer, but we weren't going to give them the option to comment or interact yet. And everyone was like, no, that's 100% what we want as ASAP. We prioritized that, and that was game changing. People loved that. The buyers loved it, and it really increased interaction, collaboration, and also the data side of things, but also mutual action plans. So I've used them extensively throughout my career, but didn't realize how many other people wanted them and also used them as well. So those two things combined were big wins and probably are the most popular feature in Trumpet today.
How do you balance, right? If you let customers give input, it's really helpful and empowering to them, but it can also steer you guys down some wrong paths, right? That maybe you're not the best fit. So do you have any stories of how you've had to tell maybe a good customer that, hey, this is not a feature we think makes the most sense?
100%. So I've experienced this in several startups I've worked at where you build for a particular enterprise client and it's specifically for them. So any feature request that has come from a large opportunity, we've always evaluated, can we build in a way where it can be used by other users as well? And we can then make that, we can introduce it to our enterprise plan or something like that. We have never built anything custom for anyone because we've avoided that route entirely. Also, if we're going to be building something that's like further down the roadmap and we're bringing it forward, we have to agree some level of commitment. Doesn't matter who they are, what logo they are. Like we're a small company, limited resources. If we're going to change our roadmap, we need commitment from them. I think it's just people respect having that open and honest conversation and explaining how things work. And whilst we would love to have that today, it means a big change internally, a big shift in current priorities and who's working on what. So we're yet to build anything custom, but fortunately, most of the things that people request, other people want as well. We've got like a public roadmap built in-app where people can submit feature requests. They get told when it's being reviewed, when it's being built, when it's live. So everyone feels super close to the product. But also when people request things, we can sort of steer them in that direction and say, look, there's these things coming up. Do you really need that? Or these things coming soon, will they suffice? So yeah.
When you opened that public beta and got all that feedback, it was free at the time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Free
And then
usage.
Okay. And then how did you kind of make that transition to saying, ooh, these people are asking for this, seems interesting. We'll build it if you pay. Like, how is that? It's kind of a quid pro quo because you want them to be involved in the community. But like, how did you have that conversation?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's still ongoing with certain things that came off the back of that, but it was more what paid plan they would be in. We have our free plan and it's a pretty generous plan. It's very similar to our paid plan. It's more just around how many pods you can share and create. But yeah, it was more, we would sort of skate it based on the tier level of business, the size business that it came from as well, and how many people would be using it. It's quite unique and a high intensity on our side from a development perspective, that would dictate it as well.
Just kind of like if they have enough people using it, that would put them into a paid tier, which would also show that they're willing and care deeply enough about this feature to put that many people on it, which then gets them paying.
Yeah, you put it a lot better than I did.
We get that part a lot, but it's only because we put you on the spot to answer the question, and then we get the chance to synthesize it for you.
I'm like, I think what you mean is this.
Yeah. So don't worry about that. Okay, so you've been doing this now for a while. Would love to hear the story of closing your first deal and what went into that. Give us the step-by-step, play-by-play.
Oh, did you do it? Who did it? How did it get done? Okay.
There's this guy here. Yeah. I think I'd be jealous if I helped close the first deal in Trumpet if I wanted that first win. But yeah, this was an interesting one because they weren't a big company, but it was more how we won them over. So it was a head of sales at a startup in the HR tech space over in the UK. Brilliant brand, very well recognized, and had signed up for the beta, but just ignored me. Fully goes, don't want to speak to you. I just want to see what this thing is.
Just like typical product-led growth. There you go.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. Leave me alone with the product stuff. I don't want to speak to sales. And I was nudging and then started to show off the product. So I was like, look, I built a pod showing you what you can achieve with Trumpet as an example. And then he finally replied and was like, I get sent sales tools every single day on LinkedIn, in email. I run a sales team. I know how it works. And I do my research. I know what tools are out there. And this is the first time I've taken a sales call in like 3 or 4 years. You know, it's your founder and this, that, and the other.
No pressure, salesman.
Yes. And he was like, because I just genuinely think this is game changing. He's like, I've not seen anything like this before. I can see the versatility of the product, how it solves several deep pain points for us. I'll be transparent. There's your kind of needs qualified. And he replied basically saying that I don't buy sales software. I don't look at it, but this is different. And we very quickly got them onboarded. They were getting value and it just became like the most embedded tool in their tech stack. And that is the first time a rep has ever said to me, can I get access to that tool? Usually sales reps like, nah, I don't want access to another tool. I've got enough. And yeah, we thanked him with a very generous discount, which they've still got today.
You're trying to figure out how to unwind for the next 10 years. Yeah, well.
Yeah. It's right. Price of doing business. So do you think that it was that message you sent showing him an example pod for him, right? So essentially catering the use case for him, putting some extra work in, not just like part of the next email drip, that made him actually play around or get interested enough in the tool where he saw the features, which was what sold him?
I would say it's that, but also then we went above and beyond. And I'm not just saying that for the sake of it, but everyone in the team, we are so close to our customers. So as soon as they started with Trumpet, they were on a free plan. And because they put that trust in us and like, look, we're going to take a stab at this new tool. I usually don't. We wanted to show them this is worth your while. We are going to go the extra mile for you. And because of, we had a good understanding of like their business, their sales team, their product and things like that. We knew that we could deliver a lot of value for them. So basically when they had feedback, we actioned it quick. And so when it came to that commercial conversation, it was not really, is this going to happen? It's more of a when and how. So I think we just built the trust and shown them that we listen to you first. We're very customer obsessed. And again, it goes back to that. We're building it together with you, not for you.
You were working together before they gave you money.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the epitome of the best sales cycles is you're already collaborating, working together. The signed contract is just a formality. The money is an afterthought almost to this typical like build up to like, maybe we'll get the deal as a big decision. Oh, it's signed or not. And it collapses after versus just like, yeah, that's great.
Fortunately, we get to use our own product like that as well.
Right. That's also helpful.
Yeah. And that's part of the beauty of selling into sales too, right? Is that you get to have very candid conversations. And in this case, right, use your own product to help the deal along. How many touch points did you have with this founder beforehand? How much research did you put in? I'm trying to get a context for how much work went into that first deal, because I think over time, obviously that curve levels out, but I want people to understand exactly how much work you put in to that first deal.
I think if we were to quantify it, so he signed up to the waitlist. So then we had an automated weekly email basically showing highlights of the product, what we were building, but also best in class sales tools, lists, podcasts, things like that. Because we wanted to show like we're educating as well as creating FOMO of the product. So that drip campaign was going on in the background, but then I was also targeting high ICP opportunities, leads who signed up to the waitlist and we wanted to get in front of, and this was one of them. And in this case, probably 2 or 3 emails, just painting a picture of like why we built Trumpet, why we want to speak to you, why we love your business. And then when I was ready to, and the product was ready, it was then, okay, why don't we just let the product do some of the talking? Here's what you can achieve. So probably 2 or 3 emails specifically from me. And then we showed off the product. Then when they were engaged, we set up a Slack Connect channel, and we do that with lots of customers. Game changing helps get them off to the tracks pretty quickly, off to the races. And I guess there's probably a bunch of touch points in that Slack Connect channel. So I won't be able to quantify exactly how many, but they had 2 or 3 big feature requests, which lots of other people then started upvoting, but they came from them originally and we shipped them very fast. So a few emails showing the product off, Slack Connect channel, and then a few features.
The engineering time, the turnaround time on that is a really positive signal to any customer about how fast you guys are willing to work. And so it's so important for that early logo collection. And 100%. I think the Slack thing is a great tip as well, right? A lot of people talk about, hey, get on a texting basis with your prospects as soon as possible, which I think makes sense, right? It feels a little bit more personal, intimate. The Slack, right? Like you're basically doing what Slack says is meeting your customers where they work, right? Like you're doing that. So I think that makes total sense. One thing too that I did recently with someone that qualified to buy, they're very interested in working with me and my team, but they just need to wait for a key hire to get on their feet a bit further. So I followed him on Instagram. And as soon as I did that, he shot me he slid into my Instagram DMs like, yo. So it's like another like intimate, like, hey, we are just like two people that enjoy each other's company that will hopefully do business together type of moment that worked for me.
Yeah. I think
so Instagram is going to save us from AI is what you're saying.
Basically.
Perfect.
Basically.
No, but the personal relationship is what it's all about, right? And that's when it's fun, right? You get to work with people that you like and you make money at the same time. You help them make money. That's what it's all about. And if you keep it kind of that distance, then it's easy to ghost you, say, no, it's not a relationship. It can be replaced with, I don't know, AI, automation.
Yeah. And that is like I think it's people are always talking about, there's 9,000 posts a day on LinkedIn about how people buy from people. And I think it's actually people start relationships with people, but good business people are only going to make a buying decision if it makes sense for their business. You might get like a little extra slack in there if you have a good relationship, but if you can start with a good relationship, then it makes everything else much easier.
100%.
So I want to talk about pricing and how you've approached that because, right, starting with the freemium model, PLG focused, what's your approach been to pricing since you guys started selling this thing?
Underpriced it. Got too much value for not enough revenue. But it's a good problem to have. I think people get very nervous with pricing and it's set in stone. We can't change it. It's a big risk. If we change it, people will churn. And fortunately, when I was at Hotjar, they experimented with pricing all the time. And the leaders there, the CEO and sort of founding team, showed that you can be confident with it. And if you communicate in the right way to your customers and say it's actually for their benefit and you're investing in the business, you have to increase prices and things like that, they will understand. You might have some churn, but you'll probably have growth as well. And they experimented all the time and I saw the benefits of that. So we've never gone into approach pricing in a way of like seeing it as super risky. We know it's always going to change. And in the early days, if you're venture backed, it's making a start on it, getting people paying. That's validation number one. You can then refine it as you grow. You can introduce other plans as you grow. But what you really need in the early days is people using the product and getting value from it. That's more important than you charging 20, 50 or $100 per user. It's getting those early champions because that's how you grow the business. That's how you find product market fit, is a repeatable process, not just from a sales perspective, but from a use case perspective, the case studies, and also the value that they're achieving. So yeah, I think we've still got a lot of work to do. We're releasing a new plan soon. I'm very excited by it, but again, it'll probably change in 6 months. So I think just being flexible is the main tip that I'd recommend.
Any surprises that you've kind of uncovered in the Hotjar experimentation? When I was at Framer, it was the same type of thing where the previous company, I had ideas around pricing and it had to go through the chain of command and it was always a big process. And then I went to the founders, I think in the first few weeks, and I was like, can we try this? And he was in the back end of the website about to change pricing. I said, whoa, now I know how fast we can do it. And they're like, yeah, but we don't know the experimentation. We have to experiment because the truth will be from the market, not from whatever we debate, right down to some like who can articulate their thoughts in a more intellectual way. They win. That goes on the website. It was like, no, let's test stuff. Through that, it sounds like you had a similar experience with Hotjar and now you're emulating that as well. Like, what has been some eye-opening pricing things that you've found that were like, oh, that's what the market does? Or like any anecdotes that I see you smiling.
Yeah. The first one that springs to mind is there is such a thing as too cheap for enterprise. We've
Okay.
uncovered.
Well, yeah. What does that mean?
Yeah. It means that sometimes they can, it's only been a couple of instances and it doesn't mean that conversation has kind of collapsed as a result. But I think enterprise are just used to being charged a lot. So when you come in pretty cheap from what they're used to, they suddenly think, is this actually the right fit for us? If it's that cheap, surely, and does all these things, there's something not kind of marrying up there. That was like a learning for us, is we have underpriced the product, hence the new plan. So yeah, I think you can have, there's no such thing as like too low a price, but it's definitely too little value.
Well, so it's an interesting, right? If price is correlated with value, right? And I think in Europe, it certainly is almost more than the US. Sometimes it's almost inverse. As the price goes down, the value goes up. That's why we like our sales and our discounts at the end of the month. But for an enterprise, it's almost like a switching cost or an opportunity cost to get everyone to do a thing. And so if it's too cheap, it's like, well, is it worth our time to do this thing? Like, this is going to be a big deal of time. And if it's so cheap, is it really worth our time? Like, yeah, that's an interesting one that I hadn't thought about.
And that also plays into the world of trials, pilots, and even a free plan. People don't really, in the world of business, they don't really take anything seriously until there is commitment. Commitment means they're paying for it. And yeah, what's the risk of an enterprise paying whatever, let's say $5K versus $100K? If you're paying $100K, you want to make sure that thing is adopted, the team are getting results out of it. If it's $5K, no big risk. So yeah, there's some small learnings there, but nothing that have kind of thrown us off track at all.
I think it's classic psychology in some ways, right? The price is a signal to what the value will be and what the commitment will be. And it's so often that the customers that try to haggle with you or negotiate price up front end up being the worst customers usually because they don't have the budget to begin with. And it shows that they care about the dollar more than they care about the value. And so I think it's not, what you're saying is nothing new, but it's really good to hear that you're going through it. And particularly in that way with the enterprise is that, listen, if you want people to take you seriously, you got to have a serious price for them to think about.
Yeah, we should start charging guests to show how valuable our podcast is. So
I like that idea.
We'll invoice you, Rory. A
Yeah.
lot, not a little, a lot. Make
Yeah.
it really worth your time.
I apologize to future guests.
So I think I think there's a few things that I'm gonna skip ahead here through the doc a little bit because I think there's
Yeah.
Rory, you had some pretty interesting things to say on the hiring front and how to build some early respect and foundations with your early employees. So I want to start talking through your hiring process. So you hired, I think, 2 AEs. So can you walk us through what that hiring process was like? Because I think it was much more advanced than most companies have when they're making their first sales hires.
I love it. So 2 AEs, any SDRs, or can maybe outline your commercial team? Okay.
Yeah, it's founder-led sales plus 2 AEs. We do have a head of CS who helps with onboarding, support, account management, things like that. But yeah, pretty lean so far. But yeah, on the hiring front, learning from Hotjar, again, awesome company, brilliant culture, and learned a ton building out their sales team in Europe. And we had over 500 applications for the AE roles. I think we created a lot of buzz in the sales world. We'd also kept note of salespeople that we'd been demoing to and thought were pretty on the ball. But 3-stage process kind of goes into a 4th step. The first call, it's get to know them. Few sales questions at the end just to kind of test their experience, but very much, are we going to be able to work with this person, be in the trenches with them? Are they a kind of first in, last out startup mentality? Because it is unique being the first sales hire startup. Everything changes every week. Your sequencing, your personas, your ITPs, your like go-to-market strategy, your targets. It's just a roller coaster. It's not fun for most salespeople. So making sure you're both in tune with that is the key bet in step 1. Step
I
2
love that.
is,
Sorry, on that. I thought, and then also I want to go back even further with a few questions. So yes, like the top 5% or maybe the top 1% are comfortable willing something into existence and creating a playbook where it doesn't exist and where people fail or where there's a lot of failure and no proof that it will work versus here's a template. We know the results, follow this playbook. I think, yeah, you're right. That's a very unique entrepreneurial mindset, very gritty. Quick question on that. How long do you spend on that call?
that's 30 minutes.
30 minutes. I like it. I would do a 50. I used to tell them it was 15, book 30. And if they're really good, stay on for 30. And if they're not so good, then you can get off in 10 and it's a lot better.
I wish I'd done that.
Yeah, no, we're all learning, man. I'm learning from you too. The 500 applicants, how did you screen to get to what were the kind of the hard criteria that you were able to say in or out on that 30-minute call before you get there, right? Because that's the first step. Is it worth 30 minutes and the energy and the scheduling? And yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a quick scan. You're looking at companies they worked at, either in SaaS, have they potentially sold salespeople is a big plus for us. The tenure of their roles, you see a lot of people changing every 3 or 4 months, and that's a red flag. We don't look at university or anything like that, but actually, what I do have to say is the bar is so low. When people apply, especially things like LinkedIn, it's one-click application. People don't then follow up and say, hey, Rory, I've just applied, but I think this role looks like awesome. I think I'd be a great fit because of X, Y, and Z. Very few people go the extra mile. And I think
like 5%. So you get your 500 down to 5% of people. Jason talks about this all the time, is like a little bit of extra effort shows you is like, now you're in the top 5%. You get a conversation with the CEO. The other people, you're like, maybe they sort through the CV at the end of talking to the top 5%.
Yeah. I think one person said a voice note. And like Trumpet's all about standing out from the crowd, doing things different. We put that in our application. Very few people went the extra mile. But yeah, so we have that stage 1. Stage 2 is a task. We pay for the task because people have day jobs and they're busy. And we don't expect them to do it for free. So it's creating a sort of mini email sequence and also pitching Trumpet back to us. Not because we want them to be an expert in the product. We're not looking for knowing every feature. It's more how they navigate the call, just seeing how they're comfortable and the questions they ask. And then there's a final call, which is setting expectations, but on both sides. Like what were we expecting the role from them, but also what to hear from them, what do they want to achieve whilst being at Trumpet? Aligning on values as well is super important. Again, we don't just have them for the sake of them. So yeah.
So it's the third call. What are those values? And it sounds like it's like kind of a culture fit. Are we like in this together? Are we going to do this? I love that one. Versus like, yeah, prove to me you get the job. It's like, no, is this right for you in your career? And are we aligned in this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I openly said to them, like, you're taking a bet on us. We've just raised pre-seed. There's 6 or 7 of us. You can go after any scale up you want and have a salary twice as big as this one. What we can help you create here is a story. And you can kind of one day walk away from Trumpet and be like, I took it from 0 to this. And that's why I want to facilitate for you. That is the opportunity on hand, but it's up to you to make that happen as well. I'm going to be working tirelessly because obviously this is my baby, but being the first sales hire is an incredible opportunity, but it comes with the tough days. And I think we're also big advocates that in the early days, people ask, we had interviews and people say, what's the culture like? I was like, there isn't a culture. We're building it right now. So I need to make sure there's a mindset fit rather than culture fit. And fortunately, yeah, it's worked out pretty good so far.
If you had to describe what that culture is you're aspiring to have, it sounds like you're already laying it down with some radical candor, transparency, self-awareness, like all of these kind of critical foundational things of any good culture, and certainly in my opinion. How would you describe it so far, like what you've done and what you're trying to achieve for anybody listening looking for the third AE?
It is, I think the thing that we prioritize the most is the team, product second. We can't build Trumpet without a happy and trusting team. So we value it, like their input, their progression, their happiness as well, because it is a stressful, long journey. But I would say that transparency is a big thing for us. If I look back to when I intentionally left uni and knew I wasn't ready to build a startup, I wanted to go into early stage startups and see how they're built. That's why you become one of the founding team members. You want to see behind the scenes. And that's why I try and open up to everyone. If I've got an investor call, they're in the room, it's fine. You can hear it. And we'll give them the details on how we raised that round or how we closed the customer or why we've made a decision. And we don't just say, we're doing this. We're saying, we're thinking of doing this. Does anyone have input? Because we're building this together. So I think it's a very trusting, to inclusive environment because I don't have the answers to everything. But I'm first time CEO. I'm not getting carried away with, I know everything in every department. So that's the opportunity here, is to hire people smarter than me, which I love. And seeing them feel like part of our growth is, truly invaluable.
It feels like the right type of people, while you can't pay as much as a late stage company that's boring, in my opinion. They get to learn how to be a leader, and they need to be entrepreneurial anyway. So they should be uniquely interested in these type of things. I think that might be, it's an interesting kind of piece to take away for other aspiring first sales hires, kind of that Renaissance sales, founding account executive, sales pioneer, all the different titles for it. But that you want to work for a founder who articulates this. And I'm not just saying that because you're here with us, but I think it's truly like, it's really important, right? Because if you don't really understand what's going on behind the scenes, you're just a salesperson kind of cog in the wheel, which is why you're trying to join a startup, is to avoid that to begin with, to be that kind of teammate to the founder and being on the call and being like listening to the investors and being a part of all of it. Now, that's the easy, fun, exciting, flashy side, and we're all sales, so that's what we'll emphasize. But that helps offset the struggle and the rejection when you don't know something will be successful and you're getting rejected. That can be like pretty demoralizing. It takes a lot of grit to offset that. But I think that really makes up for it. And I think that's why it should be attractive for the right people for that. I see a lot of founders that don't do that very well. And I think it's cool that you do that. And I think that's special. I hope you can do it as long as possible.
Very much planned to.
Yeah, I think I really like the fact that you're anti-selling people a little bit, making sure they know what they're getting into, because it's not always that glorious. But the long-term way I like to describe it to folks is when you join an early stage startup, what you're doing is you are compressing the amount of information that you learn, and the value that you can bring speeds up much faster than in another company because you're exposed to so many things. And so you treat it as a call option, basically. At some point, say the company doesn't take off to be this unicorn company, you have the option to say, you know what, I've learned so much. I can now leave and take my 3 years of experience, which is basically worth 5 or 6 years of experience at bigger companies, and go do the next thing at another company or go start your own thing.
Like pressurizes the whole thing, good and bad.
Pressure cooker of development.
Yeah, exactly.
Pressure cooker. I love it.
I like that. So I think one of the things that early stage founders that are doing founder-led sales struggle with a bit is handing off the sales process, right? Because you're worried that they're gonna blow it. They don't know the deal well enough. They don't understand things well enough. So what's your approach been to handing off the sales process to your AEs?
If you've made the right hire in the first place, so they know how to sell on paper, and you've gone and they've been put through that motion in the interview process, you need to put the trust in place. We've all been there. Your first calls, you got your sales, your founder, or maybe the sales, breathing down your neck, watching you. You're more nervous about impressing them than closing the deal. I've been there and it's stuck. But as soon as you leave it over with a client, I can breathe. I'm comfortable. I'm in control. I'm going to make mistakes, but I will make more mistakes if you're breathing down my neck. So when both AEs joined, I didn't join any of their calls in the first 2-3 weeks. And then even then I said, just send me a call recording and then I'll give you feedback, because I trust you guys. Like, you had so much excitement about the product. You get it. You're salespeople. You are our ICP. I want you to take that excitement and share that with your prospects. And I trust you, like, go and get out there. And also, to be honest, we didn't put them in front of like enterprise clients from day one. We were fortunate with a very large wait list. So we had lots of companies that they could approach and speak to that were like less risk from a revenue perspective. Doesn't mean they're less value. It just means less risk.
Lower risk, lower reward. Yeah. I like that a lot.
So they could refine, and that's a fortunate position to be in. I know certain companies, any conversation is a massive win. So we had that pipeline to kind of put in front of them. But
But you must have had quite an onboarding process to at least be confident that they knew what they were going into. Yeah, maybe talk about that a bit, of like, how do you onboard those folks?
Sure. You hear lots of
Did they
sales
shadow
people.
you? Did they shadow you? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, it's all good. I think you hear lots of talk in early stage startups of get them on the phone day one, hit the ground running. Like, it works.
Day one. Day one. All
I
right.
see it. And get them selling ASAP. And our
Is that
approach
from founders who want to not be selling but landed in a sales job to fight with their best
Handover.
stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, you're the salesman now.
Yeah.
Oh,
Goodbye. On our front.
okay. So we agree that is probably not the best approach. Day one. All right.
Yeah. So on our side, day 1 and 2 is nothing to do with sales. You are meeting the team, you're spending time with them, learning about the product, seeing why other people join Trumpet, a bit about their roles, like team lunch, this kind of stuff, real bonding. Then it goes into shadowing with myself and one of the other co-founders, spending time with CS and just
Your other
absorbing.
co-founders also sales facing? Okay, cool.
Yeah. We all push each other to sell, quite competitive. And we then also, fortunately, Trumpet's quite a versatile product. So we've also used it for onboarding and we
Okay.
build microsites. So we'll put lots of sales resources in there, demo recordings, discovery questions. It's not a playbook. And I very openly shared that with the team, is we're not building a playbook here yet. It's way too early. We're nowhere near repeatable processes. We're starting to see some, but even then, I don't want us to be going back to the playbook and saying, oh, we have to do things like that. It's up to these AEs, us together, to document as much as we can, where we've then got enough that we feel like it makes sense to build a playbook. So I think we're trying to separate the two, which is documentation versus playbook. So yeah, the week 1 was just them spending time on the team, absorbing things. And then week 2, I was like, you're good to go. Here's the product.
It's an interesting balance of, because I always look at playbooks as kind of like a training manual, right? Where you train them up as much as what that seems to work, so they're not starting from zero. But again, if you say, this is the playbook, execute this, then there's no kind of room for experimentation, iteration, and improvement.
Mm.
Like, how did you strike that balance between like, here's what we know and this seems to be working, head in that direction, versus, I don't know, you guys figure it out, because I'm sure you didn't do that. How did you strike that balance?
Yeah. So we didn't fully say just go for it. I think that that onboarding pod that we put together, it gave them a high level overview of our space, our competitors, objections we come up against, existing companies that we work with, and the value drivers of Trumpet, which is, I definitely recommend everyone looking into when you're building that early sales motion. But I said, then there's questions that I come up, objections every day in every call that we haven't experienced before. So, and you're going to face the same thing. I'm not going to ask you to read the Bible or document it all. I think let's build it together is a much better approach. And I think that collaboration in the early days is essential. You don't want sharky sales. They're just working for themselves. They're just focusing on their pipeline. It's the small wins. It's the, I got a response to this, or someone shared this insight, or we need to be thinking about this integration. We want everyone focused on like building the company, not just closing deals. And that part of what we have to do together is essentially build our playbook of the future.
I like it. So the playbook out of the onboarding is like, this is all the things that we've learned. We don't know how to do it all yet. You'll be figuring it out by trial and error of what we've learned. I also think that other point of the best first sales hires are celebrating learnings in the pursuit of revenue, not just the revenue. And I've had the same issue with some people early on that I've struggled with. because they're not sharing what they're learning. They're getting revenue, but it's not like there's no learning in it. And I like it, but it's not the collaborative, hey, we need to learn stuff. I think that's worth emphasizing is like we celebrate the learnings as a win as well as just the revenue, because without the learnings, we can get some revenue, but it's not going to be repeatable. It'll never be predictable. Yeah, that a lot is, yeah.
We have with our closed lost opportunities, they're also pushed to Slack. So we get told when there's a closed lost op, but it should be celebrated, not in a cringy way for just the sake of, we embrace everything, but it's more because we have a field, which is what would you do differently next time? And that's the key bit. So closed lost op, this much revenue. They said no because of X. Next time, I'd have just asked this question way sooner because I spent 3 months working that deal. And that's the win there is, think what you do differently next time.
I think I meant masochistic, not misogynist. Excuse me. But yes, learning from the failures as well, not just celebrating pain.
I used to have a sticky note on my monitor that said never waste a failure. So I really appreciate that part, especially early stage. I think it's important to try to ingrain that into the culture that you're trying to build. So Rory, you're a younger founder, right? Non-technical, but to build a software company, you need folks that probably are a bit older than you, that are smarter than you in their designated fields of expertise, whether it's product pieces, whether it's engineers, whatever it is. How have you been able to successfully manage folks and get them bought in on people that probably have more expertise in what they're working on than you?
Intentionally, day one, we've worked with mentors and coaches, which I couldn't recommend enough. We are very trusting. Everyone works autonomously. We don't push projects on them and micromanage or anything like that. We leave people to have a lot of freedom because they're smart people. We've hired for a reason and we trust that they're going to be able to execute and they want to execute and they can. And if they're not sure how, they'll go and learn how. But what we can facilitate is finding people that have been there and done it and are experts in their field who you can tap into for those more role-based questions. So if our lead PM asked me about a certain framework, I would go and do my research, but I'll never be able to give them that like in the trenches answer. I haven't been there and done it. I can do my research and recommend a few things and go and ask a founder WhatsApp group. It's not the same as someone who's been at a similar company that's been through similar growth. But yeah, it's been invaluable.
How do you structure that? Is there like a part of like a budget set aside that senior people or all people can hire a mentor? Or like what, like how did you structure? Because I think it sounds good. I do a lot of mentoring and advising. I mean, that's my job. But it's like everyone does it a little bit differently. How would you advise other founders to kind of set that up?
Definitely put a budget aside. Everyone gets a learning budget at every company. We do it. Adoption's never there. Learning budgets are always underutilized. I used to work in that space. Like, I know they are. But when you can lean on an expert and they can help you find answers to questions way quicker than you'd ever when I was kind of working towards, that's invaluable. And I think it also shows investment from us, like beyond just, a budget fixes a problem. It doesn't. So fortunately, as founders, we have a very strong network in the startup and SaaS and tech space. So we've been able to lean on people, but also when our investment round, it was something we spoke openly about to our investors. What's your network like? Do you know operators in companies that are similar to us, not as in product wise, but their motion, their go-to-market and things like that. And we've had incredible introductions from them as well.
That's a mentor budget instead of a learning budget.
We have a learning budget, but this is more just behind the scenes. We have a budget. It's not set in stone or capped or anything like that. And it will flex because there's a difference as well between a coach and a mentor. And we've got a couple of people work with coaches because they've got big aspirations and we want to facilitate that. And we know we can't provide all of that guidance, especially for those specific roles. But then mentoring is quite often, it's less intense, more something they can tap into, lean into as and when they need. But I think they will really appreciate knowing that support is there.
Yeah, I haven't heard anyone else speak about this as openly as part of the kind of core tenets of the business to say, we support you seeking guidance from smarter people. It sounds obvious now that you're saying it, but and we will help fund that if you need regular coaching for a up leveling, right? Because a lot of the startups is about hiring potential, not just people that have already done it. And that potential needs to be realized through guidance and not just the mistakes. Ideally, fewer mistakes at your business.
Yeah.
Where they're like, I learned a lot at Trumpet. Now I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so Rory, on some of these mentors and coaches, from my understanding, right, you've gone out and trying to recruit them yourself to
Mm.
pair up with your team.
Yeah, 100%. That's been super important, is doing the betting on my side. I don't want to like chucks on you, Jason, and be like, here you go, there's your mentor. It's a relationship that's going to evolve over time as well. They're going to really get to know you. They're probably going to hear about the pains you're having at Trumpet that maybe I don't even hear about. You don't want to share with me. And I love facilitating that. That's awesome. But yeah, if you say to a founding dev or AE at a company, go and find a mentor, like, I don't know many people. And so what we have, fortunately we do. So yeah, it was important to us to leverage our network and get some awesome people who also wanted to do it for the right reasons. They weren't just doing it because their situation under quit or whatever. They're doing it because they want to give back for the experience they had in their journey as well and their development.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. I think the intentionality that you have behind that is probably paying dividends that you will never fully understand how valuable they are. But I think it's an awesome play that more founders should replicate.
Yeah. When you see people embrace it as well, it's incredible. And the acceleration of personal development, you can't mimic it with any course or book or anything like that.
Or your time. Like you said, you only have so much time. If it's all on you to grow them, they're not. Yeah.
Yeah. And also I think, especially founders, leaders in the early days, your job is to remove barriers and like facilitate an environment where people can flourish and they can grow. You cannot coach and teach everything. You've got to basically raise your hand and say no to certain things. That's a big skill to have as being a founder, but also admit your weaknesses or where you fall short.
Yeah. Yeah. As we're coming near to an end here, I want to talk through one thing that you and I had discussed, which was one of the darker moments in your journey so far as an entrepreneur was during the fundraising process, right? Things were getting pretty close, but there were some issues near the end. So can you tell us that story?
Yeah. Any founder that goes through a fundraise will probably at some point experience due diligence, which involves lawyers on both sides, back and forth, and it can get pretty ugly. It doesn't need to be, especially at early stage. It should be really simple, but unfortunately for us, for some reason, it just got a bit messy on the legal front, and it frustrated the investors involved, and also it frustrated us. But it basically got to a point where it was almost looking like it was suddenly not going to happen. And this was very late stage. And we synced internally as founders, and we're like, this could either just fall apart and maybe we'll be able to make it work elsewhere. But actually, the reason we went with these guys is because we want to work with them. Let's just remind them of that. And like, we kind of just put it back to square one and said to them, look, things have got messy. No one intended for this to happen. We want this to work. You want this to work. Let's just have a call and I think debrief, because it's getting heated and it doesn't need to be. And I think it was needed. And that's not me blowing my own trumpet or anything like that. It was just, I think it was going to happen. Someone was going to make that call, but I'm glad we did when we did, because it felt like it was escalating and getting out of control unnecessarily. And also when we look back, for no real reason, it was just lawyers doing what they do best, which is clocking up hours. But it also, I think it gave confidence in our investors of the kind of approach that we were going to take of building a company, and that we were transparent and honest, and we're quite black and white. We'll share like our kind of feelings. And yeah, fortunately that to a certain degree saved the day.
Well, and conflict resolution builds relationships, right? So you've already been through a challenging moment with them, and it's you both parties have proven that you can collaborate and work through things together, and there will be other challenges in the future, and you already know that you know how to resolve things, which I think it's almost like you want challenging moments with anybody you're building a relationship with, so you know that you can work through them, and you know how to kind of how they work and how you work.
Yeah.
It sounds like it ended it very positively. So
yeah. Hopefully not too many more.
But it's also very analogous to a sales process, right? There's going to be at some point people are going to get lost in the weeds on certain details, and
unless they're using Trumpet, Jason.
Right, unless they're using Trumpet, and they forget about why they're here and what their original pain point was and what they're trying to solve. So I think there's a nice parallel there. All right, Roy, the last question I like to ask people here is, what's one life lesson or piece of advice that you think about almost every day?
Oh, good one. I think the two things for any like founders that are listening is, one, going back, I mentioned it earlier, being able to say no is such an important skill. I wish I'd learned it earlier. Yeah, I always think I'm going to upset people when I say no. I've had that for years. I'd say yes to everything, take on too much and burn out. It's knowing that no is okay as an answer is very rewarding in terms of having your own time. And also,
Both, are you saying both to customers and internally to
the
activities or
team,
time?
customers, founders, investors. Yeah, it's
Thank you for not saying no to us, Rory.
no to the invoice there.
No, that's fine.
There you go. And then the second one is like being aware of your strengths and weaknesses and like embracing those. I'm not perfect. I've got a whole bunch of lessons to learn on this journey, and it's still very early. I'm not naive. I hope I'm not arrogant or anything like that, but I think just wearing your heart on your sleeve is actually respected more than trying to be like super brave or I know everything as a founder, because there is no, you can look and listen to every podcast, read every book and follow every leader. There is no manual for what you're building when you're building a startup. You just need to focus on you, your team, your customers, because it's easy to get distracted and like try and mimic other people. So yeah, I think some self-reflection is needed.
Amazing. Well, this was an awesome conversation. Thank you so much. Where can people find you if they'd like to find you or Trumpet?
Very active on LinkedIn. I do love LinkedIn. Yeah, it's my home.
There's no shame in that. There's no deeper zone.
When Rory and I first met on the call, I've been following Rory for a long time.
I already know him.
Right.
LinkedIn friend. Yeah, I love it.
It is, right? I think it's gone through this phase of, people realize you can make money and like build a brand on there. And it was been saturated for a bit, but I think there are now pockets of true engagement expertise fighting through the noise.
Real humans sharing real experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, Roy, thank you again so much. It was awesome having you on, and best of luck with Trumpet.
Cheers. Appreciate it. Thanks, Seth. Thanks, Jason. Great to be here.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Rory.